Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here at this event, and my name is Daniel Wiener. I'm the CEO of ECOS. ECOS means ecology, economy, and social responsibility. We have been a consultancy for 25 years in Switzerland for sustainable development, and we're also advisor to the C40 for carbon finance, climate finance, and sustainable infrastructure finance. And I'm very glad to have you here. This has been a very successful event so far. It has had a very positive tone. We have heard a lot of nice stories. And I think it has been so good, so positive, that I can afford to be a little bit this afternoon in the 2 hours that we have for this session, a little bit the devil's advocate. I think I can try to do that, and I hope you forgive me. I think we should, if I try to challenge a little bit what the optimistic tone that we have here, I think we can make 1 or 2 steps ahead and find out where the bottlenecks are for a truly sustainable building environment. I will come back to that later, but before I would like to introduce you to you, or I would like my co-moderator to introduce herself. Please, Noriko.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Daniel. Hello, I am Noriko Chen. I work at Capital World Investors. I am an energy analyst as well as a general portfolio counselor. I've been looking at energy policy across Asia for quite some time, but I personally am very interested in these energy efficiency, both development in Asia and the implementation of these programs. So thank you very much. I am also looking forward to the afternoon presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Noriko. So when I say my tone will maybe be a little bit of a devil's advocate, it has to do with the following. I think all the examples that we saw today are very positive. Also what we heard this morning, all the efforts of the cities, all the efforts of the experts, all the knowledge that goes into that development. But when we look at the targets that we have, you know, minus 40% CO2 by 2030 or minus 50% by 2050, and nobody debates that because it's the Copenhagen Accord. The Copenhagen Accord said that we need to stop global warming at 2%. And if we want to stop global warming at 2%, we need to reduce CO2 by 80% until 2050. That's a scientific finding. So 80% by 2050, that's what we need. And that's exactly mainstreaming what we have heard right now this morning and this afternoon. Mainstreaming means the majority of all buildings, the majority of all architects, the majority of all the engineers would have to do what the good examples show to us. And right now, the stage we're in this field, I would like to compare to the field. When you look at the food industry, it's maybe the market share of good practice in this field. The way we heard it this morning is like the organic food in the food industry. So it's between 2 and 10% depending on the country. And that's not yet enough. So my point of view for this afternoon, and I want to say that up front so that the speakers can also refer to it a little bit when they come on stage and have their inputs. My point of view will be, what do we have to do to have minus 80% in industrialized countries and low carbon development in developing countries? We can see that you have to make this difference. That's clear and obvious. And I hope also that the representations of cities and also scientists and other stakeholders from the South is here too. And I want to especially encourage people from southern cities, including some Chinese cities which have a very big diversity within China, to speak up and to take part in this discussion. I think we live off that. Second remark before we start, this session is divided in 2 parts. The first part, which will be roughly the first hour, is about community building, which is community building through economics of scale. I'm looking very much forward to that discussion, because I think that if we want to be successful in the field of buildings, sustainable building, we have to have a multi-stakeholder approach. It's not just the architect, it's not just the engineer, it's not just the investor, it's not just the media, it's not just the public, it's not just the tenant, it's not just the leaser and all of these people who have a role in this field. It's everybody together. And I'm looking forward to hear a little bit from the speaker how that could be made possible. Then roughly after a short hour, we will change the subject and we'll concentrate on the field of financing for efficiency in existing buildings. That's a subject that will also be highlighted by by 4 speakers with inputs and then in a discussion with all of you. So that's the program for the next 2 hours. I wish you a lot of learning. I hope you will be smarter. You are smart already, and that you will be even smarter when you go out of this door at 6 o'clock. And with this, I would like to ask the first speaker to come to the stage. It's Mr. Mark Bekkering. He's a manager of the Environment Office of the City of Toronto, and you know the City of Toronto has been the chair, has given the C40 the opportunity to learn a lot about it, because David Miller was the chairman, or has been the chairman until tomorrow. And so we're very proud to have an input from the City of Toronto about community building around buildings. Please.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, and I'd just like to add to the earlier speech in the sense that I've really come to enjoy this session and the forum the last 3 days. I've had a lot of learning, and really appreciate the opportunity that has been presented through this forum to learn what other communities are doing and some of the challenges that they're facing and how they're addressing that. So as mentioned, I work in the City of Toronto in the Environment Office, and our mandate is to try and bring about the coordination of all the various environmental initiatives and set the strategic direction for the city. And that means we have to work with 44 city divisions, 10 major agencies and corporations. So it is a bit of a challenge for us to try and bring about getting everybody on the same page and working towards a common goal. But it is, in the last 4 years in particular, been a very rewarding experience for us, because under the leadership of our mayor, and probably the greenest city council I've ever worked with in the last 20 years, Toronto, I think, has done an amazing number of different initiatives. And I'd really like to take the whole day and talk all about them with you today. But what I am going to do today is focus in on one of our initiatives, and that's the Tower Renewal Project. And through that, the discussion about the Tower Renewal efforts, I hope to be able to try and highlight for you how we see by addressing the issue of climate change, that opportunities are being created for both economic opportunities and the ability to address some of our community building or social issues. So first, just a little bit of context, and I have to admit, being here today in Hong Kong, I feel a little silly putting up a slide saying Toronto is a city of towers, but in the North American context, it is. Over half of the city's 1 million households do live in a multi-residential building. We have just over 2,100 high-rise buildings, and interestingly also, we have about 400 new ones being proposed right now. So Toronto is a very dense city, at least within the North American context, and it is continuing to become a very dense city. Now, of those existing residential towers, over 1,000 of them were constructed in the 1960s and the 1970s, which means there's about 30 to 50 years old, and they were built during a time when energy was even cheaper than it is now, and also concrete, which is what they were mainly constructed from, was also extremely cheap. So these buildings are very energy inefficient and also need a lot of repair. So obviously, this creates a real opportunity for us. We have 1,000 of these buildings representing the housing for 200 to 300,000 households to address a very big part of our climate change or climate greenhouse gas emissions. But we also wanted to recognize that these buildings are constructed all across the city, and for a variety of reasons. A lot of them are very isolated. They were built in areas with poor public transit. They were built in areas where there's limited services within walking distance. And we felt that there's probably a real opportunity as we look to address the energy footprint of these buildings to address some of the economic and social issues associated with them. And that's really what Tower Renewal is about. It's our program to try and drive both, take a very sustainable development approach and drive both social, economic, and environmental opportunities as we look to redevelop these buildings. And as we look to do it, there's a range of different things we're hoping to do with the buildings. There's the green retrofitting of the buildings, so green roofs, installing external cladding on the side of the buildings, which will improve the energy efficiency, renewable energy, but also looking at things to reintegrate the community or these communities into the city or the larger urban fabric. So there's a lot of green space around these buildings, so we think there's opportunities for urban agriculture. There might be opportunities for new housing or the construction of new services in the area. The transit city plan that we have in place will bring rapid transit to a lot of these neighborhoods. The mayor mentioned it earlier today. Our plans to construct about 120 miles of new rapid transit in the city. So over the last year, we've been working with, I guess if I remember correctly, it's 12 buildings in 4 pilot sites to try to figure out, what is the best approach? How can we work with the property owners and the tenants in these buildings to reach the goals that we're setting for ourselves? And I've got this slide here just gives you a few highlights of what we feel the outcomes will be if we're able to bring all 1,000 plus of these 1960s, 70s buildings up to a new standard. Be able to reduce the energy well over 50%, reduce water consumption by 20%, improve waste diversion, and then provide an overall reduction in greenhouse gas emissions for the city by 5%, just by addressing these 1,000 buildings. But by doing that, there's a real economic opportunity. There's the University of Toronto did studies for us that identified that there's probably thousands of persons a year's jobs that can be generated, not just in the construction in terms of installing the cladding or the retrofitting of the buildings, but also in the ongoing operation of the buildings and other opportunities. It also probably creates an opportunity to create a whole new green industry within Toronto or the Greater Toronto area. And then when it comes to the community, engaging the tenants so that they feel that they're more involved in what's happening in their neighborhood or their building. And just to give you an example, as part of the pilots, we did a building challenge where we asked the tenants to challenge one another to see who could come up with the greatest number of tenants that would take on individual action. And we had 550 tenants participate and taking on actions such as, say, making a commitment to reduce the amount of time they would use their vehicle for going to work or doing other activities, reducing their water consumption, et cetera. So there's a real interest in the people that live in these buildings to also really become engaged and involved in changing their living environment.